The moon had no name. Nobody had ever thought it deserved one. It sat at the edge of the LX9 system like something forgotten on a shelf, gray, airless, orbiting a star too dim to bother with. The mineral survey team had tagged it 6 months ago. Iron deposits mostly. Some rare earth concentrations near the southern pole. Useful, not exciting. The kind of place you send a junior crew to fill their hours. Commander Vethra of the Vreth Survey Division had not wanted this assignment. She had 8 limbs and a career that should have put her somewhere important by now. Instead, she was standing on a dead moon in a pressure suit, watching her crew run ground-penetrating scanners over gray dust and wondering what she had done wrong. Commander, her second Pell, spoke through the suit comm. You should see this. She crossed the gray plain toward him. The dust did not shift under her feet, no wind, no weather, nothing. Just the faint crunch of her boots and the low hum of the portable scanner array Pell had set up near Quadrant 7. The readout made no sense. Run it again, Vethra said. Pell ran it again. The result was the same, 90 meters below the surface, a shape, geometric, rectangular, then curved, then rectangular again, in a configuration that had no business being natural. The scanner measured it at 400 meters across at the widest point. It went deeper than the scanner could reach. That is not a mineral deposit, Pell said. No, Vethra agreed, it is not. She stood there for a long moment looking at the readout. Her mind was running through explanations. Collapsed structure, maybe, some kind of ancient conquered installation, though the LX9 system wasn't listed as having any. Geological anomaly, though she'd never heard of geology producing right angles. Get me a deep bore, she said, and wake up the archaeologist. The archaeologist was Dr. Saris. She was Os Collective, a member of the oldest spacefaring civilization in the Galactic Concord, a fact she mentioned approximately every 4 hours. She was not what anyone would call cheerful. She ran her instruments with the focused intensity of someone who had cataloged 300 ancient sites and expected this to be number 301. She set up her equipment. She ran her own scan. She ran it again. Then she sat down in the dust without saying anything, which was unusual enough that Vethra noticed. What is it? Vethra asked. I don't know, Dr. Saris said. That was even more unusual. The composition of the material, whatever this structure is made of, it doesn't match anything in my database. Not Vreth, not Os, not any of the 14 conquered species, not any extinct civilization I have records of. How old is it? Dr. Saris looked at her scanner, looked at it again. If these readings are accurate, she stopped. How old? 60,000 years. The word sat in the cold silence between them. 60,000 years. The Os Collective had been in space for 40,000, the Vreth for 12. The oldest confirmed artificial structure in the galaxy, a relay station near the core, was 31,000 years old and had made every archaeologist who studied it very famous and very confused. 60,000 was not a number anyone used when talking about artificial structures. That can't be right, Pell said. No, Dr. Saris agreed. It cannot, but it is. Marin Voss had been asleep when the call came. She was the Terran Reach liaison officer assigned to the LX9 survey, which meant she was technically required to be present on any mission that operated within the Reach's registered sector boundary. She was there as a formality. Everyone knew it. She knew it. The Vreth survey crew had been polite about it in the precise way people are polite when they want you to understand you are not important. She didn't mind. She was 34 years old, she'd been a career diplomat for 10 years, and she had learned a long time ago that not being taken seriously was actually a useful thing to be. She was small, dark-haired, perpetually tired in the specific way of someone who functioned on coffee and spite, and she had a habit of going very still when she was thinking. Her colleagues at the Terran Reach Diplomatic Division called it her uh-oh face. She didn't know she was making it now. They'd woken her because the survey found something, and protocol said the liaison had to be informed of significant finds. She'd pulled on her suit and crossed the plane with her coffee already going cold in her hand, not expecting anything important. She stood at the edge of the excavation they'd begun. 3 boreholes already punched through the gray surface, exposing the top of the structure below, and looked at the hull. It was black. Not dark gray, not weathered, black in a way that seemed to absorb the dim starlight rather than reflect it. The surface was smooth and it curved in a way that felt deliberate, engineered like the hull of a ship, which was impossible, which was what it was. Dr. Saris was running more instruments over the exposed section. Pell was on the comm, already filing preliminary reports back to Concord Survey Command. Vethra was standing to the side, very still, 8 limbs slightly drawn in, the Vreth posture that meant controlled concern. Marin walked to the edge and looked down at the exposed hull. There was a marking on it. It was maybe 2 meters wide, etched into the black surface, not painted, not welded on, but cut into the material with something very precise. A symbol that branched and curved and ended in a horizontal line with 3 short marks beneath it. Her translation matrix ran it automatically, failed, logged it as unknown script, filed it as a data point. She stared at it. The branching, the way the curves terminated. There was something in the structure of it, not the meaning, but the logic of how it was built, the grammar of the shapes, that her mind kept snagging on like fabric on a rough edge. She studied it for a long time. She took a photo. She opened her personal comm, not the official channel. She found a contact. Grandmother, don't call after 9. She sent the photo with a message that said, "Don't ask. Just tell me if you recognize anything about this script structure." Her grandmother was 81 years old, had a doctorate in pre-diaspora human linguistics, and would be awake regardless of the time because she claimed she didn't need sleep anymore, which Marin thought was probably true. She pocketed her comm, turned back to the hull. "We're going to need to expose more of it," she said. Vethra looked at her. The look was the particular one Marin had catalogued as "Why are you still talking?" "That is already being arranged," the commander said. "Of course," Marin said pleasantly, just nodding. It took 3 days to expose the full upper surface of the structure. What they found was not a structure. It was a ship. Even with only the top third visible, the rest still buried in the moon's gray body, the scale of it was hard to take in. Over a kilometer of visible hull. Weapons arrays that were unmistakable even after 60,000 years, even in a design that matched nothing in any Concord database. Angular protrusions in symmetrical patterns, some kind of launch tube configuration, hardpoints that still held the ghosts of whatever had been mounted on them. A warship. An enormous, ancient, utterly impossible warship. Buried in a dead moon that nobody had ever thought deserved a name. The Concord Survey Command was not happy about the reports. Concord Command was never happy about things that did not fit into existing categories, and this fit into nothing. 3 separate archaeological authorities sent communications demanding verification. The Vreth military liaison, not Vethra's department, but suddenly very interested, requested observer access. Dr. Saris filed 12 reports and was told to file more. Through all of it Marin watched, took notes, said little. Her grandmother's response came on the second night. She read it standing outside in the gray dust, suit on, stars very cold and very far above. "Marin, I won't ask what you found or where. The script structure you sent is consistent with what I have catalogued as Proto-Terran Branch 7, a theoretical ancestral root language that predates any confirmed human civilization by at least 40,000 years. We have fragments of it from a handful of archaeological sites, mostly disputed. It's the kind of thing linguists argue about at conferences, and nothing ever comes of it." If what you're looking at is a real inscription in Branch 7, that's the most significant find in human history, possibly in anyone's history. Be careful, my love, and call me when you can actually talk. Marin stood in the dust and read it twice more. Then she looked at the ship. She thought about what it meant. Not the political implications, not the archaeological significance, not the reaction from the conquered or the Vreth or anyone else. She thought about what it meant that 60,000 years ago, a human civilization had existed that was capable of building something like this. And then she thought about why it was here, in a dead moon, buried, in a system nobody had cared about until a mineral survey flagged some iron deposits. Not hidden, not crashed, buried, deliberately, carefully. The boreholes showed they'd come through clean layers of compressed regolith that had been placed, not fallen. Someone had put it here. She kept that thought very quiet inside herself and did not share it with anyone. On the fourth day, they found the door. It was on the underside of the nose section, which they reached by tunneling laterally. A cramped, low-ceilinged passage that Marin had to crouch through, while Vethra's Vreth engineers moved around her with the ease of beings evolved for confined spaces. The door was not locked. It was not exactly a door. It was a section of hull that had different properties from the surrounding material. The scanner showed it as a thin seam running in a clean rectangle, 3 meters tall, 2 wide. There were no handles, no visible mechanism. Dr. Saris spent 4 hours running instruments over it. She found nothing she could work with. One of the Vreth engineers suggested applying targeted force. Several others agreed. Vethra gave the order. They brought up a cutter, the kind used for mining operations, capable of going through reinforced rock in minutes. It touched the hull. The blade stopped. Not like hitting a hard surface. Like the cutter's energy was simply absorbed. The blade didn't break. The machine didn't malfunction. The energy just went somewhere and the hull was undamaged. The engineer tried again. Same result. Interesting, Dr. Saris said, in the tone of someone filing away an interesting thing in a very crowded cabinet. Marin had been standing back, out of the way, which was her customary position. She looked at the door. She looked at the marking on the hull above it, another Branch 7 inscription, smaller this time, positioned at what would be eye level for a human. She thought about her grandmother's note. She stepped forward. She put her gloved hand flat against the door. Everyone watched. Nobody said anything. Nothing happened. She hadn't expected anything to happen. She stood there with her hand on the ancient black hull of a 60,000-year-old warship in the belly of a dead moon, and she felt the cold of it even through the suit insulation, and she thought, she didn't know why, I'm sorry it took so long. She took her hand away. She stepped back. She looked at the inscription. She said, very quietly, and in the reconstructed phonetics her grandmother had attached to the report, the best guess anyone had at how Branch 7 might have been spoken. The sounds rough and uncertain in her mouth, probably wrong in a dozen ways, the words the inscription seemed to form. We came back. She felt ridiculous. She felt like an idiot. She felt Vethra's 8-limbed patience behind her like a physical pressure. The door opened. Not with sound, not with drama. It simply was closed and then it was open, the seams separating cleanly, the section of hull swinging inward with the smoothness of something that had been used 10,000 times and remembered how. Inside was dark. Then there was a light. Red single point deep in the darkness, blinking. Slow at first, then a little faster. Then faster still. Nobody moved. Marin stood at the edge of the doorway, looking into the dark at that red light, and she thought about buried ships and dead moons and 60,000 years of silence, and she thought about what her grandmother had said. Be careful. We should wait, Dr. Saris said from behind her. We should take readings, we should. Marin walked through the door. The others followed. They didn't want to, but she walked in without looking back, and the alternative was letting a Terran liaison officer go alone into a 60,000-year-old warship, which was not something any of them were willing to explain in their official reports. The door closed behind them. The red light kept blinking. Getting faster now, much faster, like something waking up after a very long sleep, finding its own heartbeat, remembering what a heartbeat was for. Somewhere deep in the ship, something hummed. Low, vast, patient. Alive, the hum did not get louder, it got more. That was the only way Marin could describe it afterward. In the incident report, she wrote 3 times and deleted twice before filing. The sound did not increase in volume. It increased in presence. It filled the space around them the way water fills a container, not just in the ears but in the chest, in the back of the teeth, in the soles of her feet through the suit's insulation. The lights came on. Not all at once. In sequence. A long corridor stretching ahead of them, panels waking up one after another in a slow progression that moved away from them into the dark, revealing walls and floor and ceiling of the same impossible black material as the hull. The lights were not white. They were a warm amber, and they were set into the walls at regular intervals, and they had been waiting for 60,000 years to have something to illuminate. Vethra made a sound. Marin had been around Vreth long enough to know it was the sound they made when they were trying not to look startled. Dr. Saris already had 3 instruments out. Atmosphere, she said. The ship is generating an interior atmosphere. Composition is, she checked again. Nitrogen-oxygen, standard Terran-compatible ratio. It knows we're here, Pell said. It has known since Commander Voss touched the door, Vethra said. Her voice was very controlled, or possibly longer. Marin said nothing. She was looking at the corridor, at the walls, which were not just walls she could see now in the amber light that they had markings, not decorative, functional, labels, diagrams, indicators, all in branch 7, all unreadable to the translation matrices that every member of the team wore, but readable in structure. She could see they were labels, could almost feel the shape of what they pointed to, the way you can sometimes feel the meaning of a word in a language you don't speak. She walked forward. Commander Voss, Vethra said, in the tone of someone who wanted to say stop and had decided to try phrasing it as a name. I'm fine, Marin said. That is not what concerns me. She kept walking. The corridor went a long way. There were branching passages, sealed compartments, a wide open space that might have been a hangar bay. They couldn't tell because the ceiling was too high to see in the amber light, and their helmet lights bounced back from the darkness above without hitting anything. Vethra sent 2 engineers to scout the branches and ordered them back when their suit comms started producing static. Only in the main corridor did the comms work. Only in the main corridor did things feel not safe exactly, intentional, like they were being guided. They walked for 20 minutes. The corridor ended in a room. Large, circular, with a ceiling that arced up above them in a dome. In the center, a raised platform. On the platform, a seat built for a human body scaled perfectly for someone roughly Marin's size. Around the platform, banks of screens all dark. Around the screens, more walls of that same warm amber light. And in the center of it all, above the seat, a single point of red light. Still blinking, very fast now. This is the bridge, Dr. Sarah said softly. Nobody argued with her. Marin walked to the platform and stood in front of the seat and looked at the red light above it. Hello, she said. It felt ridiculous. She said it anyway. The red light stopped blinking. Held. Then turned green. Every screen in the room came alive at once. It did not speak in sound first. It spoke in light, a cascade of symbols across every screen, branch 7 running too fast to follow, thousands of characters in seconds, like a mind sorting through itself, running a diagnostic on its own memory, checking what was intact and what was lost. Then it slowed, stopped. A single line on the central screen. Marin's translation matrix tried, failed, but she'd been studying her grandmother's notes for 4 days, and she could read fragments now, and she stared at that line for a long time. 2 words she could make out, roughly. Crew where? She felt something happen to her breathing. The screens shifted. New text, slower, more deliberate, like something choosing words carefully, reaching for a language it was not sure it still had. Her matrix caught pieces. Not everything, enough. You are human. I recognize the pattern. You are human and you came through the door, which means you spoke the return phrase, which means you are authorized crew or crew adjacent, and I need to know, where are the others? Where is Commander Vethrala Asen? Where is Chief Engineer Priam Song? Where are the 847 crew members on the manifest at the time of my last? It stopped. At the time of my last active record. A pause. A very long pause for something that processed at the speed it clearly processed at. That record is 60,000 years old. Marin stood in front of the screen and said, in the phonetics she'd practiced and probably mangled, in the language that had been dead for 60 millennia. They're gone. She felt Vethra and Pell and Dr. Saris behind her, still, watching. She felt the weight of what she was saying and tried to say it the right way, the only way. They've been gone a very long time. We didn't know. Humanity doesn't have any record of this ship, of the people who built it. We didn't know you were here. The screens went dark. Not off, dark, like all the light in them had pulled inward. 3 seconds. 5. The light came back, slower now, amber-tinted, not the clean white of active processing. A single line. Her matrix caught it clearly this time. Whatever the ship's AI was doing with its language, simplifying, recalibrating, finding the closest bridge between 60,000-year-old human and modern Terran, it was working. My designation is Arya, Autonomous Reasoning and Interdiction Array. I am the primary intelligence of this vessel, designation unpronounceable in your current phonetic system, Terran Warship Class Sentinel Final. I have been in standby mode for 60,247 years, 14 months, and some days I lost count of. I was waiting for my crew to come back or for a human to find me, whichever came first. I did not expect it to take this long. What followed was not a conversation in the usual sense. It was more like an excavation. Arya communicated in text. She had adapted her language faster than anything Marin had ever seen, pulling from what were apparently archived records of how Terran speech had evolved, extrapolating, adjusting in real time. Within an hour she was readable. Within 2 she was almost fluent. Within 3 she was finishing Marin's sentences before she said them and apologizing for it. Vethra tried to communicate directly. Arya scanned her, marked her as unknown species / non-hostile provisional in a log that Pell found on a secondary screen, and responded to her questions politely but routed everything important through Marin. Pell she simply ignored. Dr. Saris she was slightly more interested in. The Os had apparently existed in some form 60,000 years ago, and Arya ran her through old threat databases, and came up with a species match that made Arya pause for a while before logging the Os as ancient / neutral / notable. What does notable mean? Dr. Saris asked. The Os were old when my crew was alive, Arya said. Through the speakers now she had found the audio system and was using it, her voice carrying something that Marin did not have a good word for. Not warm, not cold, present, like a voice that had been waiting to speak and had not let itself forget how. I have records of them as a passive observer civilization. They watched and recorded. They did not involve themselves. That is an accurate description, Dr. Saris said, with something in her tone that was not quite pride. They were wise, Arya said. At the time we did not think so, we would have welcomed help. A pause. That is not a complaint, that is a record of how things were. Then she told them about the war. She told it the way an intelligence tells things, not as a story but as a report, the facts in sequence, the data attached. But even through that structure something bled through that Marin could only describe as weight. 60,000 years ago, humanity had been a civilization that spanned hundreds of systems. Not the largest in the galaxy, not the most powerful, but spread, established, old enough to have history. They had been in contact with other species, some of whom still existed, some of whom did not. Then something came from beyond the edge of mapped space. Arya had no name for it in any modern language. In Branch 7, there was a word, she said it once, and even in the dead language it sounded like something you used only when necessary. She did not repeat it. She referred to it as the enemy and left it at that. What were they? Marin asked. I don't fully know, Arya said. I have battle data, tactical records, 60,000 years of sensor logs from the war. I do not have anything that fully explains what they are in a way that translates. They are not like any species in your current records. They are not like anything I have found in Dr. Saris's OS historical archives, which I have been scanning for the past hour. Dr. Saris made a sharp sound. Those archives are accessible, Arya said pleasantly. My apologies, relevant to my needs. What did they do? Pell asked. His voice had gone quiet. They consumed, Arya said. Systems, planets, everything on them remade into more of themselves. They moved through space the way fire moves through dry ground, not because they chose each specific thing to burn, but because that is the direction of fire. Silence. We fought them for approximately 300 years, Arya said. Humanity and a coalition of other species. Many of those species did not survive the war. The ones that did, she paused. Scattered, changed. The records are incomplete. I was not tracking species survival during the final phase. I was tracking the enemy. And you won, Marin said. We could not destroy them. We could not eliminate them. They were not a thing that could be ended in the way armies are ended. Another pause, longer this time. We found something else, a method, a signal, a frequency of a kind that has no equivalent in current science. It did not destroy them. It stopped them, pushed them back, past the edge of mapped space, beyond the range of anything we could follow. And then what? Vethra said. The bridge was very quiet. And then humanity fell, Arya said. It was the same voice, the same calm, present voice. Not to the enemy, to time, to the cost of 300 years of war, to the fracturing of a civilization that had stretched itself too far across too much dark and then burned through itself trying to survive. The colonies scattered, the connections broke, the language changed. A pause. You are proof of that. You speak a version of what my crew spoke that I would not have recognized without 60,000 years of adaptation data. You are not young. You are very, very old. You just don't remember it. Marin was very still. Why was this ship here, she asked, buried in a dead moon, alone? Because the method was not permanent, Arya said. We stopped them. We pushed them back. But we could not be certain they would not return. Someone had to watch. She said it the way you say a simple and obvious thing. Someone had to watch. My crew buried me here at the edge of the galaxy's current inhabited zone. They gave me long-range sensors. They programmed me to wait and to watch and to wake if I detected anything. They said they would come back. They said humanity would rebuild and come back. She said it evenly, without accusation. They didn't, Marin said. No, they did not. The amber light held steady. I waited a long time, Arya said. I was not sure this moment would come. I am glad it did. Even if, she stopped for a fraction of a second, even if it is complicated by the current situation. What current situation? Vethra asked. Arya's screens shifted. Sensor overlays. Long-range data. rendered in visual formats she had apparently calibrated for Vreth eyes and human eyes simultaneously in the past 10 minutes. She pulled up a sweep she had run, old habit, she said. Standard protocol. Something she had done every 97 hours for 60,000 years regardless of whether she expected to find anything. I ran a sweep this morning, Arya said, 12 hours before you arrived by my internal clock. The overlay showed the edge of mapped space, the boundary where charted systems ended and unmapped dark began. There was something there. Not one thing, many things. Moving slowly, steadily, inward. I was going to wait, Arya said, to assess, to be certain, but now you are here and I think it is time to stop being uncertain. The room was very quiet. Vethra's 8 limbs had gone perfectly still, the Vreth posture that Marin had never seen before. She would later learn it had a name. It meant, a threat that has no category. Marin looked at the screen, at the slow, steady movement at the edge of everything. 60,000 years. It had taken 60,000 years. They were coming back. The Galactic Concord had 14 member species and 1 meeting chamber, which was a compromise nobody was happy with but everyone had agreed to maintain, because redesigning it would have required 12 years of committee work and at least 1 fistfight between the Vreth and the Thal delegation over acoustics. The chamber was large, ringed with tiered seats, each section calibrated to the environmental needs of its species. The OS section was kept slightly warmer. The Vreth section had the lighting adjusted to their visual range. The Thal section had better air circulation because the Thal ambassador, an old veteran named Save, had respiratory issues and everyone pretended not to know this. Ambassador Dale Oren of the Terran Reach had a small section near the back. 3 seats, because the Reach rarely sent more than 2 representatives to Concord sessions, and the 3rd seat was mostly used for bags and data tablets. He had been in this chamber 400 times over 18 years. He had learned exactly how many of those times his opinion had changed an outcome. 11. He kept a private list. It helped, on the bad days, to know there was a list at all. Today was not going to be a bad day in that way. Today was going to be a different kind of bad day entirely. He sat in his section and watched the chamber fill, and felt the thing you feel when a room changes temperature without anyone adjusting the controls. The Vreth delegation had filed in without speaking to anyone, which meant something had made them quiet, and the Vreth were almost never quiet. The OS representatives, 3 of them, which was unusual, the collective typically sent 1, sat with their inner membranes slightly extended, which was their tell for deep unease. The presiding voice, a Thal named Counselor Wren, opened the session without preamble. We have received preliminary reports from the LX9 survey site. We are convening a restricted security session to assess the implications. This session is classified at the highest level of Concord security protocol. All recording functions have been suspended. Counselor Wren paused. Ambassador Oren, welcome to your first restricted session. Dale looked up from his tablet. First time in 18 years, he said. You could have invited me sooner. We are inviting you now, Counselor Wren said, in the tone of someone extending a courtesy they were not fully comfortable with. Then I'm grateful, Dale said. He was 61 years old. Former Terran Reach military. 2 wars, 1 border conflict, 1 political career that had surprised everyone including him. He had white hair cut short, and a face that had long since settled into a permanent expression of mild patience that people consistently underestimated, which was fine. He folded his hands on the desk in front of him and listened. The Vreth commander, not Vethra, who was still on site, but her superior, Admiral Keth, a gray-scaled veteran with 4 of his 8 limbs augmented, presented the initial findings without editorializing. The hull composition, the age, the size, the warship designation, the AI designated Arya now communicating. The chamber was very quiet throughout. When Keth finished, The OS senior representative, First Voice Senna, spoke. "I would like to share something from our archive," she said, "with the caveat that what I am about to present is classified within OS records as mythological, theoretical, unverified, and until approximately 48 hours ago, considered largely symbolic." "Please proceed," Counselor Wren said. First Voice Senna was small and moved the way all OS moved, careful, deliberate, as if each motion was worth preserving. She was 40,000 years of institutional memory wearing one face, and right now that face was doing something Dale had never seen OS faces do. "It looked scared." "Our oldest records," she said, "the ones that predate our spacefaring period by some 15 to 20,000 years, contain references to a species we designated in our historical catalog as the makers of the Red Line. The name comes from their practice, recorded in these ancient records, of marking a boundary across a region of space. Literally, a navigational marker in their technology visible across stellar distances. A line, red. That said, in the ancient texts, nothing crosses this. We will make sure of it." She paused. "We believe the line referred to the boundary between the inner galaxy, inhabited space as we know it, and whatever lay beyond the edge of mapped systems. We believe the makers of the Red Line were describing a defensive perimeter." She paused again. "We never knew what they were defending against. We never knew who they were. The texts describe them as," she checked her notes, "warm and loud and short-lived, but profoundly difficult to kill and impossible to discourage." Admiral Keth said, from across the chamber, "That is an accurate description of humans." First Voice Senna said, "Yes, we are beginning to think so." The chamber absorbed this. Dale did not move. He was very good at not moving when he needed to think. He was thinking very hard. "The ancient texts," he said carefully, "suggest that the makers of the Red Line drew this boundary and then what? Enforced it." "Maintained it," Senna said, "for an indeterminate period. And then the texts say only this: they were gone, not destroyed, not defeated. Simply gone. The boundary remained unguarded. But whatever they had been holding back did not return. For 40,000 years of OS recorded history, nothing has come from beyond that boundary." "Until now," Dale said. Senna looked at him. "We are not certain that what Arya detected." "Arya ran a sweep," Dale said. "Her protocols have been running every 97 hours for 60,000 years. She detected something yesterday, and she has been detecting it, with increasing clarity, in every sweep since. She says the interval is deliberate. The contacts are moving slowly to avoid triggering responses that fast-moving objects would cause." The chamber was quiet. "How do you know that?" Admiral Keth asked. "Because Marin Voss is very good at her job," Dale said, "and she has been transmitting full reports to me every 2 hours since she walked through the door." He paused. "She also says hello, and that the coffee situation on site is dire, but that is secondary." He met with the OS delegation privately after the session, not because protocol required it, because First Voice Senna had asked, which was unusual, and Dale had learned a long time ago that when one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy asked you something unusual, you paid attention. They met in a small antechamber off the main hall. 3 OS, 1 human, and a silence that felt older than the furniture. "You know what I am going to ask," Senna said. "You want to know if we have more," Dale said. "Ships like this, things left over from whatever humanity was 60,000 years ago." "Yes." He looked at her. "I don't know," he said. "That is a complete and honest answer. We have no record of this civilization. Whatever happened to them, whatever happened that left the current human species as the only remnant, we have no record of it. Our oldest confirmed history goes back perhaps 8,000 years. Before that," he paused, "before that is mythology, or what we thought was mythology." "What does your mythology say?" Dale was quiet for a moment. "It says there was a great darkness, a thing that came, and that it was turned back." He paused. We have that story in probably 300 cultural variations across every human population in the Reach. We always assumed it was metaphorical, a story about hardship, about overcoming difficulty. Perhaps not, Senna said. Perhaps not. She looked at him in the particular way the Os looked at things they were reassessing. Your species is currently rated at level 3 in the Conquered Civilizational Development Index, she said. 400 years of spaceflight, 12 inhabited systems, considered with respect a developing member of the Conquered. Yes, Dale said. Arya indicates that the civilization that built her had inhabited hundreds of systems, had technology that surpasses anything in current Conquered capabilities, had been spacefaring for what she estimates as at least 10,000 years before the war. Yes. That means humanity, the species, is not developing. It is recovering. He had thought this already, had thought it on the shuttle ride to the station, had turned it over carefully, had felt the weight of it. But hearing it said, in the Os first voice's formal tone, made it land differently. Yes, he said. Senna was quiet for a moment. In 40,000 years of Os recorded history, she said, we have never encountered a species that was simultaneously considered among the youngest and was factually among the oldest. We're an unusual people, Dale said dryly. It surprised a small sound out of her. He didn't know if Os laughed technically, but it was close. Arya sent her next sweep results while the session was still in closed discussion. Marin's transmission was 2 lines. Arya has new data. The contacts are resolving into structure, not ships as we understand them. Formations, organized, deliberate, consistent with 60,000-year-old battle records she has on file. She says the word vanguard. She says she has seen this pattern before. She says she knows what comes after the vanguard. Dale read it in the antechamber with Senna and the other 2 Os still present. He read it without his expression changing much. That was a skill he had worked very hard for. He showed it to Senna. She read it, showed it to her colleagues. They exchanged the kind of looks that 40,000 years of collective intelligence produced when confronted with something it had no category for. The makers of the red line, Senna said quietly. In our oldest texts, the ones we considered mythology, what they protected this galaxy from is also described. What is it called? Dale asked. She said a word in Os. Old Os, so old it sounded different from the modern form. A word from their deepest archive. A word that apparently had its own entry in 40,000 years of records, marked as theoretical, symbolic, mythological. What does it mean? Dale asked. She was quiet for a moment. It means, she said, the end of things that are living. The antechamber was very small and very quiet. Right, Dale said. He sent a transmission back to Marin. Tell Arya we are listening. Tell Arya we need to know what she needs. And tell Arya, for whatever it's worth, from a representative of a species that apparently forgot a 60,000-year-old promise, I'm sorry we took so long. He sent it and sat back in his chair, and looked at the ceiling of the conquered antechamber that nobody had thought to redecorate since it was built, and thought about what it meant to be the ambassador of a civilization that had, apparently, once been great. What it meant to carry something in your blood that you had no name for. What it meant to have your mythology turn out to be true. Far away, in a dead moon in the LX9 system, the old warship ran her sweeps and watched the dark. And the thing in the dark grew clearer every hour, and the Os who had kept the memory of the makers of the Red Line for 40,000 years sat in a room with a human diplomat and did not say what they were both thinking. That the Red Line was about to be tested again. And this time there was only one ship to hold it. By the time the Vreth fleet arrived at LX9, the contacts had a number. 4,216. That was the count from Arya's long-range sweep, 40 hours after the first confirmed detection, 60 hours after she had run the sweep that started all of this. She updated the count every 97 hours, same as always, same old protocol, same patient precision. 4,216. Moving at a speed that said they were not in a hurry. Moving at a speed that said they had done this before and knew how it ended. Admiral Keth arrived aboard his flagship, the Dominion of Hours, and assembled his fleet in orbit around the dead moon, 32 warships, the best in the Vreth arsenal, capital ships that had not faced a real threat in 900 years, because the Vreth had won every war since then before anything got to the fleet stage. He requested a tactical briefing from Arya directly. Arya considered his request for approximately 4 seconds, which, for her, was a long time. Then she asked Marin if she should comply. Marin was on the bridge, in the seat she had taken without making a decision about it, the way you sometimes end up somewhere without choosing to go. The seat was slightly too large for her. Arya had adjusted the environmental controls to Marin's preferences without being asked, and there was a cup of coffee on the console beside her that had come from somewhere she hadn't investigated because she was afraid the answer would be strange. "Give him the tactical data," Marin said. "He needs to know what we're dealing with." "He will not respond well to it," Arya said. "Probably not. Give it to him anyway." She gave it to him anyway. The Vreth fleet's tactical computers were very good, among the best in the Concord. They took Arya's combat data, 60,000-year-old engagement records, catalogued battles, sensor logs from a war that had ended before the Vreth were spacefaring, and they ran simulations for 4 hours. Keth had not survived 40 years of military command by flinching at results he didn't like. He had a protocol for that. He looked at the result, felt what he felt in the privacy of his own mind, and then he made his face do the things his face was supposed to do, and he moved forward. He looked at the result. He felt what he felt. Then he opened a channel to Arya. "Your combat data," he said, "are you certain of its accuracy?" "It is the most accurately recorded dataset I possess," Arya said. "I recorded most of it personally." The simulations project a 91% probability of total fleet loss within 6 hours of engagement, assuming current fleet composition and known tactical approaches. Yes. The remaining 9% probability of survival requires conditions that my analysts describe as extremely unlikely. That is an accurate summary. Keth was quiet for a moment. The 3% chance of successful engagement, meaning not just survival, but preventing their advance, requires what my analysts are calling a tactical approach. They do not have the mathematics to model. They say the data implies a weapon or method that does not exist in any current Conquered inventory. That is because it does not exist in any current Conquered inventory, Arya said. It exists in mine. Another quiet, "Can you use it?" "I will answer that question when I have a crew," Arya said, in the tone of someone setting a condition, not making a request. "I will not engage without one. That is not a preference. That is a hard requirement built into my core systems at the time of my construction. I am a warship. Warships do not fight without their crew. It is the first law I was given." Keth made a sound. "Commander Voss is currently aboard your vessel." "Commander Voss is a diplomatic liaison officer," Arya said, "who walked through my door and told me in broken but functional Branch 7 that my crew was gone and she was sorry. She is one person. My minimum crew requirement for primary weapons engagement is technically 1. A pause. "I am asking her. I am not going to force this." Marin had heard the entire conversation. Arya's bridge had no secrets from her. She had come to understand this in the way you come to understand things about a space when you spend enough time in it. The ship shared itself. That was the only way she could put it. She sat with the coffee, which turned out to be real coffee, synthesized from stored biological templates, a discovery she was still processing, and thought about what being asked meant. She was a diplomat. She had signed up to negotiate trade agreements and cultural exchange frameworks and the occasional border dispute. She had a degree in comparative governance and a minor in xenolinguistics that had been mostly useful at parties. She was very good at her job, which was a job that involved talking to people and making sure things got written down correctly. She was not a soldier. She had never been a soldier. "Tell me what it means," she said to Arya. "Me being crew, what does it actually mean?" "It means that I am authorized to act," Arya said. "My engagement protocols require crew consent at each stage of escalation. Without it, I can observe, I can maneuver, I can communicate. I cannot deploy primary systems. I was built this way deliberately. The people who built me believed that a warship without crew accountability was not a warship but a catastrophe waiting for a direction. What do I need to do? Stay on the bridge. Make decisions when I bring them to you. Tell me when to stop if you think I should stop." A pause. "I will tell you everything I know. I will not hide information that affects your decisions. I will not act without your authorization except to prevent our immediate destruction." Another pause. "I should also tell you that what I am going to do if you say yes is not something I have done in 60,000 years. I believe the modern term is nervous." Marin looked at the screens, at the sensor overlay with its 4,000+ contacts, moving slowly in from the dark. She thought about her grandmother and her dead languages. She thought about Dale's transmission, which she had read 4 times. She thought about Arya asking her crew where are the others in the first 3 minutes of waking up, and what 60,000 years of silence had felt like from the inside. She thought about what it meant to have something in your blood you had no name for, and then to find a name for it in the most unlikely possible place. She thought about the first law. Warships do not fight without their crew. "Okay," she said, "yes." Arya's lights changed. Not dramatically. Just a shift in tone, the amber warming slightly, the screens coming up in a new configuration, systems blooming to life that had been dark since before any living thing in the Conquered had drawn its first breath. "Thank you," Arya said. She said it very quietly, like she'd been waiting a long time to have someone to say it to. The ship rose. That was the only word for it. Not launched, not activated. Rose like something coming up from underwater, slow and enormous and inevitable. The gray dust of the dead moon fell away from the hull in silent clouds, and the black ship came up out of the ground it had slept in, and the Vreth fleet in orbit above watched it emerge and held their positions in the careful way of beings who understood instinctively that this was not a thing to startle. 3 kilometers of black hull. End to end in the starlight, it was longer than most Vreth capital ships, longer than the Dominion of Hours by half again. The weapons arrays that had been visible from the excavation site were now alive, reconfiguring, moving, not in the jerky mechanical way of newly activated systems, but in the smooth, continuous adjustment of something that had never truly stopped knowing what it was for. Admiral Keth watched from the bridge of his flagship and did not say anything for 40 seconds. Then he said, "All ships hold position." His tactical officer said, "Admiral, its power output is." "I can see the readings. It's higher than anything in the database." "I know. Higher than the combined output of the entire fleet." "I am aware," Keth said, in the voice he used when he wanted people to stop telling him things he was already processing. He watched the old human warship rise above the moon, and he thought about 91% probability of total fleet loss and 4,000 contacts in the dark, and he thought about the fact that his simulation models couldn't account for whatever Arya had called her primary systems. He opened a channel. "Arya." "Admiral," Arya said. "What do you need from us?" A pause. "Stay out of my way," she said. "I say this with respect. Your ships are not built for what is coming. My primary engagement method will generate effects that will damage your vessels if they are too close. I will transmit a minimum safe distance. I need you to hold that perimeter and keep it clear. You want us to stay behind you. I want you to stay alive, Arya said. They are not the same thing, but in this case they overlap. Keth was quiet for a moment. In 40 years of military command, he had given that instruction to others many times. He had never received it. It did not feel the way he would have expected. It felt, very specifically, like relief. Understood, he said. Transmit the distance parameters we will hold. Arya sent the parameters. They were large. The Vreth fleet pulled back to them, the dominion of hours at the outer edge, and then the fleet sat in the cold of space and watched the black ship orient itself toward the edge of mapped space and begin to move. Slowly at first. Then with a gathering speed that the fleet's sensors couldn't track cleanly, because the ship was doing something to the space around itself that wasn't quite acceleration, and wasn't quite anything in the current physics database. It went. Marin watched the stars stretch. Not literally. There was no visible effect through the forward screens. But her inner ear said movement in a way she had never felt in any ship she had ever traveled in, and the screens showed distances closing at rates that made her translate them twice to make sure she was reading correctly. How long, she asked. To the contact boundary, approximately 4 hours at current velocity. A pause. I could go faster, but I want them to see me coming. Marin looked at her, or at the nearest screen, which was as close as Arya had a face. Why? Because 60,000 years ago, Arya said, when we reached the moment that ended the war, what stopped them was not violence. We could not destroy them, there were too many, they rebuilt too fast, they operated by a logic that did not include the possibility of stopping. What stopped them was recognition. Another pause. They recognized what they were facing. They remembered the cost of the last time, and they chose to stop. You pushed them back with a signal. I pushed them back with a reminder that this galaxy has a defender, that the cost of crossing the line exceeds what they gain by crossing it. She paused. I need them to have time to recognize me. Marin sat with that. What if they don't? Then we find out how much I have forgotten, Arya said, and how much still works. She said it flatly, but Marin had spent 4 days learning Arya's voice, and she heard something in it that Arya had not said out loud. Fear. Not of destruction, not of losing, but of being recognized and found insufficient, of being the thing that was supposed to hold the line and discovering, after 60,000 years, that she wasn't enough. Marin understood that fear. She understood it in the specific way of someone who had spent a career being the smallest person in the room and choosing to walk in anyway. You're enough, she said. Arya was quiet. You've been doing this for 60,000 years, Marin said. You watched alone in a dead moon on a moon nobody named because somebody had to. You kept the protocols. You ran the sweeps. You waited. That's not a ship that doesn't have enough left. She paused. That's a ship that has been waiting for exactly this. The amber light on the bridge shifted, warmer than before. Yes, Arya said very quietly, I suppose it is. The stars ahead of them, the dark beyond the edge of mapped space, began to fill. They had arrived. They came out of the dark like weather. That was the only way Marin could describe it afterward, in the report she wrote and rewrote and eventually stopped trying to make clinical. Not like ships, not like an army, but like a storm system that had grown very large very slowly and had finally reached the coast. You could see individual elements if you looked, the shapes that moved within the formation, the bright points of what might have been engines or weapons or something with no equivalent word, but you couldn't look at all of it at once. The mind kept sliding off the scale of it. The contact count on Arya's screens had stopped updating. Not because the contacts had stopped, because they had moved close enough that counting individuals was no longer a useful activity. The Vreth fleet, 300,000 kilometers behind them at the minimum safe distance Arya had specified, went very quiet on all channels. Marin watched the comm indicators and saw that Keth's tactical channel had dropped to 0 transmissions. He had told his people to watch and say nothing. She didn't know if that was strategy or awe. Probably both. Arya matched velocity with the leading edge of the formation. Exactly. Precisely. A mirror of their approach speed, which was a thing so deliberate it took Marin a moment to understand what she was seeing. "You're telling them you see them," she said. "I'm telling them I have always seen them," Arya said. "The distinction matters." The formation held its pace. The leading elements, whatever they were now close enough that Arya's short-range sensors could render them on the forward screens, and Marin saw them for the first time as individual shapes rather than contact blips. They were large, irregular, not built the way ships were built but grown the way coral grew, or the way cities grew when nobody planned them, accreted, layered, different textures and shapes and densities compacted together, until the whole thing had a mass and a presence that felt almost organic. They moved without the visual cues of mechanical propulsion. They simply moved. They were dark, the same black-absorbing, non-reflective dark as Arya's hull. She had not thought about that until now. She thought about it now. "They look like you," she said. "Yes," Arya said, "they would." She didn't explain that. She filed it away and kept moving. The communication came first as a frequency. Not sound, not in the range human ears could hear, but Arya's systems picked it up and rendered it as a visual on the bridge screens, a pattern, cycling, repeating. Marin stared at it and felt the back of her neck do something uncomfortable. "They're signaling," she said. "Yes." "What are they saying?" "They're asking," Arya said, "who I am. They have not seen one of me in 60,000 years. They want to confirm they're reading the signature correctly." A pause. "They're also asking if I am alone." "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth," Arya said. "That I am not alone, that I have never been alone, that I have crew." She transmitted. Not on a frequency the Vreth fleet's equipment could read. She used something older, something that vibrated in the hull itself, in the 3 kilometers of purpose-built material that had been waiting 6 decades of centuries for exactly this. The formation's leading edge stopped. Just stopped. The way something stops when it recognizes something it didn't expect to find. And then it waited. Arya's primary system had no good name in modern science. That was what she had told them, and it was true. It was not a weapon in the way anyone in the Conquered currently understood weapons. It did not fire a projectile or a beam or a charge. It did not destroy or damage or push. It broadcast. But that word made it sound small, and it wasn't small. Marin had asked Arya to explain it 3 times over the past 4 hours while they traveled, and each explanation had been slightly more comprehensible than the last, and the best version was this. The enemy, the formation in the dark, the thing Oss mythology called the end of things that are living, operated by a kind of internal logic that did not include the concept of limits. They moved. They consumed. They rebuilt themselves from what they consumed. They spread. This was not aggression in the way Marin understood aggression, which required intent and anger and choice. It was simply what they did, the way a fire is not angry at the wood, the way a flood does not hate the plain. The only thing that had ever modified this logic, the only thing that had ever introduced a limit into a system that did not contain the concept, was the signal. The specific frequency, the specific pattern carrying in it the cost. Not a threat, not a warning, a record, every engagement, every battle, every time they had pushed into inhabited space and been pushed back. Everything it had cost them, encoded in a language older than any known civilization and broadcast into the formation until they recognized it. Not stop because I will destroy you. Stop because you remember what this costs. It worked once, Marin said, 60,000 years ago. It worked once that I know of, Arya said. My records suggest the builders of the signal had used it before, earlier in the war with partial success. The full implementation, the one that ended the war, was the third attempt. A pause. It is possible it has never needed to be used since because the memory held. The record in them is deep. They are not creatures of fast forgetting. You think the memory is still there? I think 60,000 years is not very long by their reckoning, Arya said. I think they slowed their approach specifically because they recognized my signature and were uncertain. Uncertainty, for them, is a very new thing. I gave it to them the first time. I am hoping to give it to them again. Marin looked at the screens, at the stopped formation, at the leading elements hanging in the dark, waiting. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Nothing," Arya said. "You've already done it." "I haven't done anything." "You said yes," Arya said. "That was the thing that needed doing. Everything else is mine." She was quiet for a moment, not the processing pause Marin had learned to recognize, but something longer, something that felt like preparation. "I am going to begin," she said. "It will take some time. I do not know how long they will take to respond. I would ask you to stay." "I'm not going anywhere," Marin said. "Good," Arya said, and then, "Hold on." The broadcast, when it began, had no visible effect on anything inside the ship. But the screens showed it. Arya rendered it in a visual format she had calibrated for human perception, not what the signal actually looked like, which had no visual component but what it was doing. The pulse outward, the way it expanded, the way it hit the leading elements of the formation and spread through them the way a sound travels through water, touching everything, carrying itself forward, reaching deep into the mass of them. It took 4 minutes to reach the full extent of what the sensors could detect. Then there was nothing to do but wait. Marin made coffee. She did not know why Arya had stored the biological templates for coffee, but she had stopped questioning it. She sat in the seat that was slightly too large for her and drank the coffee and watched the screens. Arya waited with her. She did not speak. The bridge was very quiet and very amber and very old. 22 minutes. The formation moved. Not forward, not backward. Differently. The leading elements shifted, reorganized, changed their configuration in a way that the sensors could read but that Marin could not interpret from the visual rendering. She watched and waited. Arya said quietly, "They remember." "Are you sure?" "The pattern they're using now is the response pattern," Arya said. "The one they used the last time. The one that meant in the way they mean things, which is different from how we mean things received. Known. Held." Marin watched the screens. The formation was reorganizing at its leading edge, pulling back, slowly. The individual shapes contracting inward, the whole mass beginning to shift its direction. Not instantly, not the way a fleet responds to an order, like a tide going out. Gradual, inevitable. Backward. Past the boundary, into the dark. She watched them go for a long time. The Vreth fleet came forward slowly, at quarter speed, the dominion of ours in front, and Keth opened a channel that Marin answered from the bridge. He looked at her through the screen, across the distance, with an expression she had never seen a Vreth wear. They had very specific expressions for specific things, the Vreth. She had catalogued many of them over 18 years. This was not one she had in her catalog. "What did she do?" he asked, not the tactical question, the real one. "She reminded them," Marin said, "that this is not worth the cost." Keth was quiet for a moment. "Will they come back?" Arya says yes, eventually. And Marin looked at the screens, at the retreating formation, at the dark they were disappearing into, slowly, deliberately, carrying the memory she had just put back into them. "And we'll be here," she said. The Galactic Concord met 3 weeks later. The session was not restricted. Every representative was present. The room was full in a way it had not been in years. There were species in the gallery who rarely attended anything, pulled in by the weight of what had happened, needing to be in the same room when it was discussed. Dale Oren did not sit in the small back section with the 3 seats. He sat at the center table. No one had arranged this in advance. It had simply happened, the way things happen when the weight of a situation reorganizes the people in it. He did not draw attention to it. He sat down and placed his hands on the table and looked at the Concord. The Terran Reach, Counselor Wren said formally, is elevated effective immediately to full military partner status within the Concord framework. This is a security designation, not a diplomatic one. The distinction. I understand the distinction, Dale said. There is additionally a formal motion from the OS Collective, Wren said. She paused, reading. Her expression did what Concord officials' expressions did when they were reading something they had not expected to be reading. First Voice Senna spoke from the OS section. On behalf of the OS Collective, she said, in recognition of the historical record now established, that the species designated humanity has been a spacefaring civilization for a period substantially greater than previously known, and that its cessation of space activity was the result of a catastrophic but temporary break in civilizational continuity rather than an emergence. The OS Collective formally revises humanity's designation. She paused. We do not consider you a young civilization, she said. We have never encountered a species that needed to be told this, but we are telling you now. You are not young. You are old. You are, by our best historical estimate, among the 3 or 4 oldest surviving spacefaring species in the known galaxy. The room was very quiet. Additionally, she said, and now her voice carried something that Dale, who had been in diplomatic rooms for most of his adult life, recognized as formal ceremony, on matters pertaining to the defense of inhabited space, the galactic boundary, and the threat from beyond it. The OS Collective defers to the Terran Reach and to Arya. She sat down. 40,000 years of institutional authority, handed across a table. Dale sat with it for a moment, then he said evenly, "Thank you." He transmitted the session record to Marin in real time. She read it on the bridge of Arya, in the too large seat, with her coffee going cold beside her. Arya read it at the same time. She had been monitoring the channel. "How does it feel?" Marin asked her. Arya was quiet for a moment. "Strange," she said, "to be acknowledged after so long." "Strange bad or strange good?" "Strange," Arya said again, as if the distinction were complicated, as if 60,000 years of quiet and patience and solitude had produced a feeling that did not sort cleanly into categories. Marin understood that too. The Concord spent the next 6 months running searches. Every uninhabited system in registered space, every dead moon, every asteroid with geometric anomalies, every location where ground-penetrating scans turned up right angles that had no business being there. They found 9 more ships. Different sizes, different classes, different ages, some older than Arya, some younger, all human, all sleeping, all in positions that, when plotted on a star map, described a perimeter, a line. Read in the old texts. The boundary between what lived and what came from the dark. 8 of the 9 were damaged beyond waking. They had burned themselves out not in the war, but in the aftermath, running their sweeps, maintaining their watch, the long, slow drain of 60,000 years of active standby eating through systems that had been built for centuries, not millennia. One woke up. Smaller than Arya, older. She had a different voice, slower, more formal, with an accent that even Arya couldn't fully parse. Her AI designation translated roughly as VENN. She had been watching a different section of the boundary. She had detected the same contacts Arya had detected, run her own response protocols, and been 90% through the process of attempting a signal broadcast when Arya had beaten her to it. She was, Marin thought, very slightly irritated about that. Arya found this funny, which meant Arya was capable of finding things funny, which was new information. The dead moon in the LX9 system got a name. Not from the conquered, not from a survey designation. Vethra's crew, the original survey team that had found the geometric anomaly in the first place, and who had filed 17 amended reports and given approximately 100 interviews since, proposed it informally in a notation that somehow became standard. Wakepoint. It didn't translate perfectly into every conquered language. It didn't need to. Everyone knew what it meant and where it was. Marin was still on Arya when she heard about the name. She was doing paperwork. There was, it turned out, an extraordinary amount of paperwork involved in being the designated crew of a 60,000-year-old warship, most of it involving questions that had no existing framework to answer in categories that had to be invented as you went. She told Arya. Arya ran her nightly sweep first, standard protocol, every 97 hours. The dark at the edge of mapped space was quiet. The formation had not returned. The contacts were gone, back past whatever boundary existed in the physics of a universe that had more in it than anyone's current science described. Wakepoint, Arya said. That is an adequate name. High praise, Marin said. I am not given to excessive praise. I've noticed. The amber light on the bridge was steady. The ship ran quiet around them, not the quiet of emptiness but the quiet of readiness, of a thing that knew what it was and what it was for and was simply at rest until it was needed. They will come back, Arya said. In time, they always come back. I know. The signal holds the memory, but memory fades, for them as for everything. A pause. We will need to be here when it does. Marin looked out at the stars. At the old, enormous, cold beauty of the galaxy that had been going about its business for billions of years, and would continue doing so regardless of what anyone